a shy guy with glasses whose voice was adored by millions. The vocalist of a legendary band, which was the meaning of life for all teenagers in the early and mid-2000s. His tragic story can still bring tears today, but it can also inspire and remind everyone that people live as long as they are remembered. Why didn't he even have a sofa, although his songs were played 24 hours a day on radio and television? How did he change nu metal forever? And why did the life of the mortally wounded soul of Chester Charles Bennington end? You will learn about this and much more in today's video. This is the Enco Stories channel, and we are starting. Say what you want about me as a person. Say what you want about me as a creator. I don't care. I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I'm made of. And everything suits me. Chester Charles Bennington was born on March 20th, 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona. His mother, Susan Elaine Johnson, worked as a nurse, and his father, Lee Russell, was a police detective. From an early age, his parents noticed their son's inclination to art. Barely learning to speak, little Chester confidently said that he would become an actor or a rock star in the future. The first song he memorized at the age of 2 was the hard rock hit Hot Blooded by Foreigner, which he heard on his older brother's tape recorder. And in a few years, he learned and sang all the songs from the children's musical film about the sailor Popeye. Chester grew up a happy child. His sparkling brown eyes mesmerized adults, but a cruel world ruined his childhood and perhaps his whole life. When he was 7 years old, he faced a tragedy that he could not tell anyone about, but which left its mark on his whole life. It's about violence of intimate nature. Chester had an older friend who took an unhealthy interest in him, although at first it all looked like a very unfortunate and unfunny joke. It escalated from a touchy-curious, what does this thing do, into full-on crazy violations. I was getting beaten up and being forced to do things I didn't want to do. It destroyed my self-confidence. The horror did not end, but repeated again and again, year after year, until Chester turned 13. At first, he was too scared to tell anyone, afraid that he would not be believed. In a bitter irony, his father had encountered similar cases at work more than once, but was so busy that he did not notice the horror that his son experienced every day. The fact that his parents divorced when he was 11 added up to the existing stress. Chester and his sister stayed with their father, and his older brother and another sister stayed with their mother. The only friend to whom Chester could tell everything, and even the most terrible thoughts, was a blank sheet of paper. The drawings, the first clumsy but honest poems, all this was an echo of his inner pain. One day, some of these poems will be turned into songs, and millions of people will be able to understand and share his pain. In addition to these problems, there was also bullying at school. Chester was clumsy, shy, very thin, wore glasses, and was often bullied. Only music saved him from all problems.
I would say that music has probably kept me alive. More so than anything else. I mean, other than, love from your friends and family, I think that, music is probably the reason why I still am here, because that is how I get out a lot of the stuff that's going on inside of me. And that's how I kind of work through a lot of things. I reflect on my life. I reflect on how I feel.
It was difficult at school, especially since he and his father often had to move from one town to another. His only friends were outcasts like himself, but he also had successes. The boy showed good results in sports and regularly and with a huge margin won in athletic competitions. Furthermore, Chester enjoyed playing in a children's musical theater troupe, which gave him his first experience of performing in front of large crowds. I didn't realize I could sing very well, but I knew I could sing pretty good. I was actually very involved in theater before I got bit by the lead singer bug, and that was what I actually thought I was going to do professionally. And although Chester's soul really lay in acting, and in the future he would get several episodic roles in movies, his true passion was singing. Although he quickly lost interest in sports, Chester trained his voice constantly and tirelessly. Eventually, he would learn to scream like a devil and sing like an angel. Music brought salvation, but on the other hand, there were personal troubles, constant quarrels at home, severe childhood trauma, and bullying from classmates. In order to somehow escape from reality at a fairly young age, he began to use, drank a lot, and sometimes resembled a living skeleton. I'd become a person that wasn't me. This is me. I'm a nice, friendly guy that always stuck behind this monster that was just really a hurt kid. An important moment in his life was the day when Chester won the school song contest performing A Question of Lust by Depeche Mode. Of course, this was just a school competition, but probably for the first time, his classmates looked at him with admiration. Shortly after, at a party, Chester met a guy with a guitar named Jason. Chester couldn't hide his interest in the instrument, so they got acquainted, and it turned out that Jason was looking for someone who could sing. They got together a few times to play guitar, then started thinking of getting a microphone, and remembered that there was one in a local church that wasn't too hard to get into. They took out a microphone, came to Jason's house, and played every song by the Doors that they knew. These gatherings took place at least 3 times a week. Most of the time they enjoyed music. The rest of the time was devoted to the same substances and alcohol. Nevertheless, the constant presence of a like-minded person and music made Chester more relaxed and more confident. He became less and less shy, more and more often attracted all the attention at parties, and soon people started talking about him as that talented dude who was always under something.
Right when you think you've got it all figured out and everything's good, it just comes and kicks you right in the nuts. And then every time you think it can't get any worse and that life sucks and it's never going to get better, all of a sudden, the sun comes a-shining.
Somehow, Jason found out the local band Sean Dowdle and his friends was looking for a vocalist and arranged auditions. Chester not only passed it brilliantly, everyone was so impressed that they immediately took him into the band without even listening to the rest of the candidates. After so many years of bullying, failure, Chester finally found people who appreciated him and admired his talent. In 1992, they formed the band, with Chester on lead vocals, Jason on bass, Chris Goad on guitar, and Sean Dowdle on drums. The boys wanted Chester in their band so badly that Sean even came to ask his father for permission. He, of course, was not delighted with the offer, but showed angelic patience and said that if Chester would study normally, then he would not mind. In about a year, the band put together a demo tape with 3 of their own songs. They also learned to play a huge number of covers for Nirvana, Ramones, Stone Temple Pilots, Guns N' Roses, and managed to give more than 70 concerts with this material. Then, their music sounded like this.
Painted pictures in my brain. You act like this is some kind of game.
They played their first full gig when Chester was just 14. It was a crazy party, and they played about 50 covers in 3 hours. Nevertheless, this was the maximum that the band managed. After a while, it fell apart, but very soon, Sean assembled a new lineup and invited Chester to join him again. The band was originally called Lovely's Bleeding. Later, they changed their name to Gray Days. The first performance of the new lineup took place in 1994 in Scottsdale. The concerts followed one after the other, and the first recording contract was already looming on the horizon. They were lucky and found producer David Nauer, who invested about $10,000 in the recording of their first album. This led to the release of the record Wake Me, and also provided them with their first rotations on the radio. Chester's gloomy lyrics did not surprise anyone at the time. It was typical of the genre in general. But only close people knew that these texts were not an attempt to follow the canons of this genre or to provoke. In fact, it was the cry of a mortally wounded soul. In 1995, they released the album. The band underwent a transformation after which the final lineup of Gray Days was born. Mace Byers played the bass and Bobby Binish took over the guitar. During this period, everything was going well. Chester assembled the band and also found love. On January 28, 1996, Chester met Samantha Marie Ollett, who became his wife a few months later. They got married on Halloween of the same year, but their financial situation was so bad that the newlyweds could not even buy wedding rings, so they tattooed them on their fingers. It's worth saying that this was not Chester's first relationship. Moreover, at that time he already had a 1-year-old son, Isaiah, from a former girlfriend whose name was Yelka Brand. Both were not destined to be happy in this relationship. But Chester took care of his son and tried to give him everything that he lacked in his childhood. Real popularity and the first set of money were still far away, so Chester had to work wherever he was needed. He swept leaves for $4 an hour, worked at Burger King, and at the same time did everything to break into the music industry. The band often performed, but these concerts were almost for charity. Simultaneously, they wrote a new album, which was released in 1997. The album No Sun Today somewhat improved their position, and the themes of the songs shifted from personal to socio-political. The concerts became massive. the first fans appeared, and Chester signed autographs for the first time, although sometimes it took hours. But although the band became quite famous in Arizona, the label was not interested in a third album. Tension grew between the members, which led to the band's breakup in 1998. Before continuing Chester's story, we need to move to Los Angeles, where another talented teenager grew up. His name was Michael Kinji Shinoda. Unlike Chester, Shinoda's childhood was quite normal. His parents lived together and always supported and encouraged their son's passion. From the age of 6, he played the piano, sang in a children's theater group, and wrote his first song when he was 11 years old. He had to leave piano lessons because his teacher did not share Shinoda's passion for hip-hop, especially the music of his idol, Dr. Dre. She just couldn't teach him to write music like that. At the age of 16, Shinoda was given a sampler and he began creating his own music, to which he rapped. Michael was a friend of Bradford Delson, who also took music lessons from an early age, was obsessed with Metallica, and formed his first band called The Pricks. The band also included his neighbor, Mark Wakefield. Later, Mike, Mark, and Brad met a young Robert Gregory Burden, who started a new band called Relative Degree. Mike attended their sessions just to watch Rob play and pick up interesting samples for their songs. In the winter of 1995 to 1996, Mike and Mark formed a new band called Zero, with the intention of making music that combined their passion for rock and hip-hop. With this idea, they recorded their first demo, and fate brought them together with producer Jeff Blue. Jeff was able to see the band's potential, so he offered them a deal with a little financial backing, $4,000 up front and $1,000 for a demo recording. Despite the arguments between Mike and Mark about who would be the leader of the band, they signed the contract. This allowed them to buy new instruments and equipment to enhance their live performances. By the way, at the same time, the band Papa Roach also tried to sign a deal with Jeff, but the producer preferred Zero. In early 1999, a representative of the band Zero, who was handling the contract, was drinking at a bar with Jeff Blue. There was Grey Goose vodka on their table, so both remembered a good band that broke up not so long ago, Grey Days. They also remembered Chester, who at that time was far from music and was busy with his family. Without thinking long, they called Chester directly from the bar and offered him a place in the band. It happened on the eve of his birthday, so Chester took the offer as a real gift from fate. He was sent tapes to check out the Zero material and send them his own interpretation of some of the tracks. Chester was not only blown away by the sound, he had never heard anything like it, so he immediately knew he wanted to be a part of it.
So I like the way it starts off. It's kind of mellow, you aren't quite sure where they're going with it. It's a good intro for radio too, it could be a nice radio edit.
The next day, Chester left his own birthday party and called Mike Jones asking for permission to use his studio. Mike had previously worked with Grey Days, recorded their first demos, but that wasn't enough to allow Chester to record due to an old friendship. The studio cost $100 an hour, so Bennington had to record his demos at the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences. 2 days later, he called Jeff, said it was ready, put the phone next to the tape recorder, and played what came out. What I heard floored me. Every crack of his voice had a story to tell. It was iconic, genuine, vulnerable, urgent, beautiful, and hit you in the gut. I immediately called Brad and Mike and told them I was flying Chester out to Los Angeles. Chester understood very well that this opportunity should not be lost. Although the decision was not easy, firstly, he left his wife at home. Secondly, he quit his stable job and went almost nowhere. However, he quit the job immediately after his boss assured him that he would be able to return if things went wrong in California. So, already on Monday, Chester was in Los Angeles, met the band, and gave them his tape. Everyone was delighted, but at the same time, they had to listen to several more candidates for the role of vocalist. One day, a guy who was supposed to sing right after Chester came to the audition. After hearing Bennington's voice, the boy refused to audition and said they would be idiots if they didn't take Chester right now. He was really skinny with glasses, and he was wearing this awful butterfly collar shirt that hung all over him. It made him look like a cheesy guy from an Arizona nightclub bar. But his vocals on our demo were incredible. He sang like a fucking beast, the same way he sings now. Not even knowing what success awaits them in the near future, they had dinner at a local pizzeria, took their first photo, and started working the next day. Mike Shinoda knew from the first meeting that Chester Bennington would change his life. Chester gave his all, and its energy was contagious to all the other participants. It may seem like Chester's life had finally turned on the bright side, but in reality, things weren't so rosy at first. He risked everything and for the first time literally lived like a homeless person. He spent nights at the studio, at friends, and slept in the car. But this did not scare him away. On the contrary, it motivated him to work harder and harder. And later, the situation improved.
I mean, I was like, F the world when we started this, and now I'm like, I love you! I'm looking outside like, oh, the birds in my car. You know, look at that.
That's funny.
That's so cool.
Moreover, he seemed to have found a best friend. It was growing closer to Shinoda, with whom he adored writing songs. No matter how different their pasts were, when they sat down to write, magic happened. In both memories, it felt like a session of psychotherapy, especially given how intimate Chester's lyrics were. Some of his lyrics addressed that stuff, the abuse. So when he and I were talking about the songs, he told me about it. It was a weird way to get to know each other, but that's how it happened. Mike Shinoda said that the only person he spent more time with than Chester was his wife. It wasn't friendship at first sight, but the more time they spent together, the more Chester opened up to Shinoda.
I've never heard such a crazy upbringing, like such a crazy childhood, like running wild, like in the streets and doing hard drugs on the roof of his high school. Just like just barely staying out of jail. And so different. And that's what made our dynamic what it was. It's like, I didn't grow up like that.
Mike knew his past, understood his inner state, and even wrote songs about it. Chester said that one of his favorite Linkin Park songs is Breaking the Habit, which Mike wrote. Its words resonated with Chester so much that he kept interrupting the recording because he couldn't hold back the tears. Nevertheless, Chester recorded all the vocal parts in one day. The debut album was called Hybrid Theory and was independently published by the band with a circulation of 1,500 discs. The band, with Chester on vocals, was for a while named the same as their first album, but later that too was changed. Realizing that no one knew them yet, they let everyone download the songs for free on their website. Moreover, they went to music forums and chat rooms in order to promote their music. The guys were not too shy to engage in their own promotion. Sometimes they entered the popular chat of the Korn band and wrote something like, "A new band has appeared. Hybrid Theory. Rate it." Between August 1999 and May 2000, the band played in several clubs in California and Arizona. On August 27, 1999, they were invited to the Big Fish Pub in Tempe, the same club where Grey Daze had last performed a year earlier. Unfortunately, their performances did not have much success. Besides, they continued to hear rejections from record companies, and no prospects were foreseen. They sincerely thought that they had invented a unique style, but while they were on their way to the top, quite a few bands appeared before their eyes that combined both rap and rock in their music. Then they decided that they would simply be the best of them. Surprisingly, this simple strategy soon paid off, and in 1999 they finally signed a contract with Warner Bros. Records. The first problem was the name. Warner already had a band called Hybrid, so each member came up with about 30 names, and then everyone voted on the best one. If the guys had a different mindset, today we might know Linkin Park as Clear, Probing Loggers, or Platinum Lotus Foundation. Chester came up with the name Linkin Park when he drove past the park of the same name in his hometown. Then appeared a new problem with this name. There were a lot of such parks in the United States, and a domain with such a name would cost $10,000. With the rest, they found a free domain, Lincoln, for $10. And on May 24, 2000, they registered the domain linkinpark.com. The first show they performed under the new and final name was June 9, 2000 in West Hollywood. Then they gathered about 30 people, mostly their friends. Free musicians who were used to doing everything on their own could not avoid conflict with serious people from the label who sought to control everything. For example, the label wanted the charismatic Chester to front the band, but he refused because he thought it was unfair. Furthermore, the label tried to edit the songs. They wanted to change Mike's style to make him look like Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit. The label created many difficulties, but the more time the guys spent in the studio, the stronger was the bond between them. They continued to work on their music and their style without losing their own authenticity and without listening to stupid advice. The album was written at a marathon pace. Mike and Chester were both exhausted and happy. All the pressure they felt from the producers was poured into the song that eventually brought them their first notable success. On October 3rd, 2000, the guys went to the nearest 24-hour store and waited until midnight to be the first to buy a copy of their debut album. They were trying to guess how many copies they could sell. Someone said about 3,000. Chester was a real optimist and said 8,000. By the way, if you want, you can pause and write your version in the comments. How many copies did they manage to sell? We'll tell you the correct answer in a moment. Everyone was wrong. In the first week, the album sold 50,000 copies, which greatly exceeded all their expectations. The album broke sales records in the United States, and Linkin Park almost instantly became the idols of all teenagers. The album consists of hits including the band's most famous, most recognizable composition, In the End. Even if you're not a fan, you will 100% recognize this song from the first few seconds. It's interesting that both Mike and Chester called it the most pop song of Linkin Park, although at first it did not have a name, but it had every chance of not even getting on the album. The central idea of the composition is hidden in the chorus, and the words, "I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter." On the one hand, quite depressing. On the other hand, quite motivating. It is in this uncertainty, according to Shinoda, that the meaning of the song is hidden. Of course, every fan managed to find something of his own, but the text directly refers to the long journey that the band took during the first few years of its existence. The song is a real treasure for various interpretations, but it is obvious that it is directly related to the disappointments that not only each member of the band faced, but also any person in general. Chester wasn't too fond of the song at first, but grew to love it as he realized how important it was to the band's fans. Another reason, or result, of such popularity can be considered the fact that the song was performed literally at every concert. Dozens of covers of this hit contributed to this, from the band itself to rappers like Jay-Z.
With one thing, I don't know why. It doesn't even matter how hard you try.
It's safe to say that the album was destined for success, although the musicians doubted it. In addition to good music that literally pushed the boundaries of the genre, the album was also filled with strong lyrics in which they were not shy in talking about their problems. This is what made the band the voice of the teenagers of that generation, and what led to the formation of one of the largest and most famous fandoms in the history of music. There is one story that perfectly demonstrates how much their popularity grew after the album release. On November 11th, Linkin Park was supposed to perform at a sponsored concert, which was supposed to take place in the parking lot of a shopping center. But instead of 500 spectators, 5,000 people came. And while the area around the parking lot was paralyzed by traffic jams, the new stars calmly prepared for the performance.
Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you out of the frame. Put your name to shame, cover up your face. You can't run the race, the pace is too fast, you just won't last. Come on.
In honor of the album going platinum, Chester got a Linkin Park tattoo on his back. He later got another tattoo dedicated to the band, a soldier from the cover of Hybrid Theory on his left leg. In general, Chester's photos show that he was a fan of tattoos. He first tattooed a carp on his right bicep when he was 18 years old. His zodiac sign, Pisces, is tattooed on his left bicep. A zombie gypsy can be seen on his right arm, a pirate's skull on one elbow, and a skull with a web and a rose on the other. On his back were 2 dragons and a 6-armed witch, and on his ring finger was the wedding ring we already mentioned. In July 2000, he got a flame tattoo on his wrists, which became his trademark. This world had fascinated him since his teenage years, and Chester said that tattoos were important to him because they were pain and pleasure at the same time. In 2002, Chester became a father again. Samantha gave birth to his son, Draven Sebastian. And from the outside, it seemed that Bennington was living his best life. Unfortunately, this feeling was misleading. Reaping the fruits of the long-awaited success, the band gave concert after concert and simultaneously worked on the second album, right on tour, during which time they wrote about 80 demos. But only 13 of them were included in the tracklist of the second album, which was called Meteora. It was released on March 25, 2003, and sold almost 1 million copies in just 1 week. By the end of the year, more than 7 million copies had been sold, making the album the 4th best-selling album of 2003. 50 Cent's debut album, Get Rich or Die Tryin', took first place at the time. Meteora became a conditional continuation of the first album, but the lyrics and sound became more mature and professional. The album continued to develop themes of loneliness, pain, anger, but at the same time gave listeners hope for a better future. All this was clearly synchronized with the mood of the people of that time, which logically led to even greater love of the audience and even greater success. A typical problem with any band's second album was that critics had split into two camps. Some praised this release because it resembled the previous one, while others criticized it for the same, saying that the band was not developing and was engaged in self-repetition for the sake of profits. Chester said that there was some truth in the second version because Meteora was essentially made for fans who wanted to hear a continuation of the first album. Nevertheless, the number of people who liked Meteora was so much more. Somewhere I Belong was the first single that immediately spoke of self-identity and self-discovery. People spend their whole lives searching for their way, trying to put aside the past, get rid of the pain that prevents them from finally finding their place. Chester hated this song during the recording because it took too long. Think about it, 40 different choruses were written for it, and the process of recording it was one of the most difficult. But the result was worth it. Chester was living the life of a rock star, partying, drinking heavily, and gradually distancing himself from the rest of the band. It was a difficult time for him. Besides alcohol, which would later become a real affliction, he suffered from diaphragm problems caused by an infection. He hid it from everyone until the day his wife found him passed out in their house. He was immediately sent to intensive care in Los Angeles, where he underwent treatment and regained consciousness. Due to hospitalization, they had to postpone the European tour and shooting of the music video for the song Numb, which became the same hit and symbol of the band as In the End. This song holds a special place in the hearts of the band's fans. The song tells about an unhappy person who is finally tired of other people's expectations. They want to be themselves and not adapt to the wishes of other people, even those closest to them. It's about the eternal problem of generations, about parents and children. Adults try to transfer their views, their vision of the world to children, try to make them look like themselves, but this only hinders the growth of individuality and their own identity. It's a perennial problem, so it's no surprise that many people felt personally affected by this problem. Without exaggeration, Linkin Park once again became the voice of a generation that was tired of others expecting from them not what they personally wanted. No matter how many years pass, this song will resonate with people, so it is guaranteed immortality. At this moment, the band's, and personally Chester's, success was absolute. For 4 years in a row, those guys gave their all, not feeling sorry for themselves, so fatigue was also evident. They were barely in their 20s and had everything they could have dreamed of. After the resounding success, the band took a break, which coincided with problems with the label and Chester's divorce from his wife Samantha. All these events led to the fact that he began to drink even more, and music took a back seat. Once he was asked when to expect a new album, and Chester replied that music was the last thing on his mind at that time. As a result of the divorce, he lost his house, his son, and almost all his money, so he had to start all over again, but there was almost no strength left. He started his day with a pint of beer, a pile of pills, and continued at this pace until he passed out. Back then, Chester lived in a small apartment that didn't even have a couch. He did not go outside for several days because he did not even have normal clothes. Everything remained at his wife's house. He even thought about shortening his life. He even tried to do it once. Surprisingly, when he was pulled out of this bottom by a great tragedy, the consequences of which he saw with his own eyes, he was invited to the charity festival Music for Relief, the purpose of which was to raise money for the victims of the tsunami in the Indian Ocean in 2004. He was persuaded to go to Thailand, where Chester saw with his own eyes the schools destroyed by the tsunami, met with the children, and donated almost the last $100,000 to the foundation. This fund still exists today, not least thanks to Linkin Park fans. In 2004, their combined efforts raised nearly $9 million for people affected by tsunamis, earthquakes, and hurricanes. Later, the fund evolved, became more ambitious, and got its own application. Shortly after the charity performance that brought Chester back to life, he met two musicians in Los Angeles. Their names were Ryan Shack and Amir Darak. They were members of Orgy and Julian K. They quickly got along and decided to create something together. This is how the band Snow White Tan was born. Ryan and Amir were excited to play with Chester. Later, their joint project was renamed Dead by Sunrise. The third Brett event was that Ryan introduced Chester to his friend Talinda Annie Bentley, who was then a model for Playboy magazine. They married on December 31st, 2005, and she later gave him a son, Tyler D., and two twin daughters, Leela Grace and Leela Rose. It was that woman who would be with Chester until the very end. She was not only a model, but also had a musical education behind her, so she was nearby not only in their house, but also in the studio and at concerts. Talinda always spoke passionately and lovingly about her husband. She said that Chester often talked about their future together and planned their long and happy life together.
He suffered from depression as a child, and it was untreated. He had traumas throughout his childhood, which many of us have. I have myself, but the way his pathways kept going, they just kept going towards disaster. And by the time he died, it was so much work. I believe, as Mike said, it was so much work for him to just do normal stuff, to be happy.
Despite the fact that love appeared again in his life, problems with addiction did not go away. Sometimes it got to the point when he had fits of hysteria, during which he could, for example, jump out the window. At one point, Talinda, Ryan, and Amir managed to corner him, so he agreed to go to rehab for a month. But after only a few weeks, he was already drinking more than before. Talinda was exhausted and turned to the other members of Linkin Park for help, and only they were able to reach Chester. In the end, he just gave up and went back to treatment. I feel that for the first time, I actually have a change of not using. Before, it would always be in the back of my mind. Can I make it through the day without drinking and without lying to everybody? In 2009, they released the album Out of Ashes, which Chester made with the band Dead by Sunrise. Working on the material was difficult, as most of the songs were written in 2005. When his life was falling apart before his eyes, the album symbolized a rise from the ashes. Chester was tired, but whole. And although this album was not too widely successful and the sales numbers were rather modest, for Chester, this band was an outlet. He wasn't on tour or in the studio with Linkin Park. He was trying to record something with Dead by Sunrise. Chester said that fans definitely shouldn't expect a new Dead by Sunrise album every 2 years, but added that a release every 5 is a very likely option. He had separate plans for this project, but unfortunately they were not destined to be realized. In general, moving between bands was quite common for Chester. In the future, he would also temporarily change bands, record music, and perform with those bands with whom he was comfortable at the moment. Chester was once asked who he would choose if he had to choose, Dead by Sunrise or Linkin Park. The performer replied that he loved everyone equally but would choose Linkin Park, because for him they were number one and it's forever. Chester gradually recovered from addiction, was a father of happy children, a good husband, and wanted to play music again. Linkin Park set itself a difficult task, to repeat the success of the previous album but to avoid repeating itself. Talking about their idea for the album, Chester said that they were never afraid to challenge themselves and reinvent the style. He didn't want to make another radio hit that would get stuck in his head. Instead, he wanted to do something more. The album Minutes to Midnight was released on May 15, 2007. The band changed their sound quite radically, and fans did not understand this record immediately, although it later awarded it the first place on the Billboard 200. In the first week, 623,000 copies were sold. According to Chester, the main theme of this song was recognizing your mistakes in the past, accepting them, moving forward, and trying to be better again. The composition in its own way serves as a bridge not only between the previous releases and the new one, but also between the old Chester and his new version. The marriage with Samantha, which broke up after 9 years of living together, problems with alcohol and various substances did not contribute to personal development. Therefore, that and the following songs were a conditional oath and promise that Chester would try to change. But in addition to quite serious topics, there were songs like Bleed It Out, which was created near the end of the album. And it sounded like the musicians finally relaxed and were just enjoying themselves. In general, the whole album in one way or another touches upon quite serious topics and openly calls the listener to change. Admit mistakes, but leave the past behind and move forward. And it's not only about the personal, but also about the human in general. The album got that name for a reason. Minutes to Midnight is sent to the doomsday clock. This is an American project that symbolizes the tension in the international situation and progress in the development of nuclear weapons. As soon as there's a new war or other major conflict in the world, its hands move, and midnight on this clock is the moment of the coming nuclear disaster. It's less than a minute and a half to midnight today. This theme will be continued in the band's next album. And if that album scared some fans and made them turn away from their favorite band, then the next one was only supposed to intensify this situation. Instead of writing music as usual, the band spent months experimenting. As a result, their hard drive in the studio was filled with strange, abstract sounds that could have been the soundtrack of a medicated hallucination. The birth of the album, which was named 1,000 Suns, happened almost by accident. The concept was about a patient unjustly locked in a mental hospital who became a laboratory rat. Producer Rick Rubin, who worked with the band again after the success of the last release, was sure that if this album was not immediately appreciated, it would eventually become a classic. To some extent, that was true. Chester was of the same opinion and said that people would either give them 5 stars or hate both the album and the band. The name refers to a quote by Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, who described the power of his invention with the words, "the radiance of 1,000 suns." The album also partially touches on apocalyptic themes, narrowing them down to dark events in the lives of their authors. The first single was Catalyst, and it set this post-apocalyptic vibe for the new album. The music video only increased the feeling of hopelessness in a new, completely destroyed world. Even the name Catalyst indicates the main message. People are the main driving force through which the world is moving into a not-so-bright future. However, even in such a gloomy work, there is a prevailing opinion that although people are leading the world to disaster, only they can change it. And although the album, the title of which refers to the nuclear disaster, was rather gloomy and pessimistic, they ended it on a good note. The song The Messenger is a good reminder that there's a way out of even the most hopeless situation. I realized that I wanted to write a letter to my children. It said that they were entering a cruel world where it would be difficult for them, but they will be able to resist. They would always be loved by their family, and this would be the only lifeline that will pull them out of this chaos and cruelty. Parenthood made Chester a much more mature person, and it's clearly visible in such songs. He stopped yelling at people. Instead, he started talking to them.
Those angel voices.
For 2 albums in a row, the band talked to listeners about serious issues, which divided listeners' opinions about Linkin Park's latest work. For many, this release was not at all what they expected. But despite this, Mike Shinoda calls this album his favorite, and over time, it still got its attention and fans. If the recording process was active and intense, everything was quite calm in Chester's private life. This year, Chester was lucky enough to get into the cast of the new part of the horror series Saw, where he played one of the maniac's victims. Bennington was a huge fan of the series and watched all the episodes multiple times. He played a character named Evan, a skinhead and neo-Nazi who, together with his associates, was punished for racist views and actions. It was a brutal 5-minute scene with candid and brutal shots, but Chester was happy like a child and didn't leave the set until he took pictures with everyone. By the way, this was not his first experience working in the cinema. Chester previously had a cameo in the 2006 action film Crank and its sequel, Crank High Voltage, in 2009. Off the stage, his life was completely devoted to his family and pets. In 2009, he became the face of the Ink Not Mink campaign, whose slogan was, "Be comfortable in your own skin and let animals keep theirs." He encouraged his fans to adopt stray animals rather than buy them and boycotted all fur and leather products.
Adoption is really important. Making sure that you get your pets spayed and neutered is extremely important. There's too many animals running around on the streets, being captured, killed.
In 2011, the band began writing the next album, prioritizing the studio rather than touring. As Chester told the Rolling Stones in his interview, the band's new goal was to release a new album every 18 months. Touring for years was unbearable, so they wanted to write more. The Living Things album was released on June 26, 2012, and it showed how much the band had grown up. The song Burn It Down became the first single and a new big hit. Shinoda said that the song was about his and Chester's personal stories, as well as their relationship with fame. People turn celebrities into objects of their worship. Then the star does something wrong and instantly becomes an object of hatred. The band faced this for the first time when they changed their sound after the second album. But at that time, they were too old to take such accusations seriously, especially since sometimes they still return to the old sound. Whether it's for nostalgia or for the fans, there's a track on the album called Lost in the Echo that instantly takes you back to the good old days of Linkin Park. It was a much needed and timely album. The previous release clearly fell into the not for everyone category, but Living Things instantly attracted the lost attention to them. It cannot be said that everyone was satisfied. There was enough criticism, but for the most part the release was received warmly and marked Linkin Park's return to the mainstream. As it happened before, after working on an album with Linkin Park, Chester decided to experiment with other bands and became the lead singer of Stone Temple Pilots. It was one of his favorite bands since childhood, so performing together was an honor for both him and them. In total, Chester spent almost 2 years with them, the result of which was a huge number of joint performances and the mini-album High Rise. Linkin Park's sixth studio album, The Hunting Party, was released on June 17, 2014. If the previous release only partially returned the band to the early 2000s, then on this album, they succumbed to nostalgia even more. Just like the good old days, Shinoda rapped, Chester crooned, and their drummer hit the drums so hard he broke his back. This record is a kind of return to the roots, a real gift to those old fans who no longer expected to hear the Linkin Park that they loved in childhood. Perhaps the heavier sound was influenced by one article read by Mike Shinoda. It was about the fact that rock lost its position long ago and can no longer compete with other genres. This made Mike change his approach to the new album and make it heavier. On January 18, 2015, before the start of a concert in Indianapolis, Chester broke his ankle while playing basketball backstage. He jumped up and accidentally stepped on a water bottle, breaking it. Because of this, the following concerts had to be canceled. It later turned out that he needed surgery, so the recovery time was longer than first thought. Chester felt guilty about the band and gradually went back to his old ways. After alcohol and pills came severe depression. This time, he did not hide from the world, but took the first step on his own and went to rehab. During this period, he wrote a song that he never released. Its title perfectly described his attitude to life and the world at that time.
I remember I still have lyrics in my phone. Like one of the songs is called "I Hate the World" right now, and that's literally like the punchline of my. That was the whole chorus.
Funny.
You know what I mean?
I didn't know that.
And like,
I love that.
you know, the lyrics were like, "I want to punch a hole through the ceiling." You know what I mean? Like, that was where I was at. And then I got through that part, and then I got through another part, and then it was talking about where I was at after all of those emotions and kind of like dealing with that. So it really is a good representation of where we are now.
When Chester came back to life, preparations for the new Linkin Park album began. This time the work was done differently. All members of the band felt that everyone had something to say. Everyone had experienced a lot of stories over the years, so they wanted to share them. They were motivated by a huge fan base to create something new, but they had to like the result. For the first time, they collaborated with several different artists, vocal producers, and songwriters who helped make something fundamentally new. One of the key contributors was songwriter and producer Egg White. He helped write the song One More Light, which also gave the album its title.
Who cares when someone's well, I do.
Their words were inspired by the death of Amy Zarrett, who worked for Warner Bros. For 25 years and died in October 2015 of cancer. The band would later perform it in honor of their friend and musician Chris Cornell. And in a few months, they will edit a music video for this song and dedicate it to another close friend and musician, Chester Bennington himself. Actually, the main message of the album One More Light was voiced by the first line from the song, "I'm dancing with my demons. Nobody can save me, Talking to Myself, and Heavy are a trilogy of songs that show the state Chester was in at the time. Interestingly, most of the songs on this album really feel like Chester's confession, the cry of his soul, and it feels like they were written by him. In fact, he was the author of only 2 songs. All others were written by Shinoda, which once again proves their kinship. Chester often talked about Shinoda's prolificness, his fanaticism when it came to music. When they flew on planes, Chester was usually sleeping or playing games, while Mike was always sitting at the computer and continuing to make music. He did it all day. He was obsessed with his work. So it's hard to overestimate Mike Shinoda's contribution to Linkin Park. Unfortunately, the album was received much cooler than the previous one. In fact, they ran into a real wave of hate, accusations of venality and populism. It's hard to criticize a band for trying to do something different. The problem isn't even that it's a pop album. The fact is that this is a weak commercial move. Maybe the classic Linkin Park will return for the 8th album, but who will listen to them? Considering that the album was really very personal for each of the members, such statements were annoying and maddening. This was especially true of Chester, who was sometimes completely ashamed in his expressions towards his haters and promised to explain the meaning of the album when meeting. Of course, not with words. If you are also against hatred and advocate for love, then we have a lot in common. Of course, we don't make legendary albums, but we also try to make interesting and high-quality videos. If you enjoy them, we'll be grateful for the like and subscription. It helps and motivates us a lot. Thank you. Chester had never been shy about being vulnerable, especially when it came to their music. After the album release and mixed reactions to it, Chester wrote this on his Instagram. Everyone has a right to their opinion. This post is not for everyone. We're used to people reacting differently to our music, but there's something I can't stand. These are people who question how hard we work to make our music. People who question the heart and soul of my band. I don't care if some people in the industry don't like the direction of the music we're making. I would like you to tell me to my face. There is a line that cannot be crossed. It's easy to hide behind a computer screen. It's easy to be smart when you don't have to look someone in the eye. Don't like music? Fine. Do you like it? Also good. Just don't act as if you know me and as if you know what hard work this is.
Fuck! That was good.
And the recording itself took place in a very tense atmosphere related to Chester's personal problems. His stepfather was diagnosed with cancer. Alcohol returned to his life, and for some time, Chester had to be treated again in order not to finally let go of the shore. In one of his last interviews, there was no direct indication of what he was going to do, but at times, you could feel how frustrated Chester was. He saw how people couldn't cope with depression, with relationships, with children, but most importantly with themselves. Once he said that he did not understand how his wife Talinda still did not leave him. Maybe Chester was joking. The fact was that he was a good cook. In February, Chester was on the radio in Los Angeles and spoke quite frankly, touching on sensitive topics. Then he said it was difficult for him to just live. Sometimes he felt stuck in one place. Sometimes he managed to break out of this circle, but then everything happened again. The greatest terror for him at that time was to be left alone with himself. When he was with the band, family, fans, he felt great, but when he was alone with himself, everything changed. Perhaps One More Light is the most intimate Linkin Park album. They took what they were feeling at the time and put it into music. Some fans consider this album a farewell note.
Nobody can save me.
According to Mike, Chester was in great shape, full of enthusiasm and ideas. He wanted to prove once again that he was able to get out of the black hole of despair. Unfortunately, fate had other plans for Chester. One morning, his wife brought him terrible news. Chris Cornell, lead singer of Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog, Audioslave, his close friend, and one of his favorite vocalists, has passed away. Chester had faced death so many times in his life, but that news destroyed him morally. Their friendship began in 2008 during the Project Revolution tour in North America when they sang on the same stage together. They were kindred spirits who had experienced the same suffering, difficult childhood, divorce, and depression. Chester was Chris's son's godfather, and they were family friends for many years. At Chris's funeral, Chester performed the song Hallelujah, which he called his favorite song of all time. Chester later took to social media to share a letter he wrote in memory of his friend. I can't imagine a world without you in it. I pray you find peace in the next life. I send my love to your wife and children, friends and family. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life. With all of my love, your friend, Chester Bennington. That same day, Linkin Park performed on Jimmy Kimmel Live and decided to play One More Light, dedicating it to Chris. It was a very emotional performance for both the audience and Chester, who couldn't hold back the tears. The next 2 months were very busy, and Chester gave himself completely to every show. At the last concert in Birmingham, when Chester performed the songs One More Light and Crawling, he left the stage and he sang in the audience, allowing people to hug him and touch him. Later, people will see in this a desire to finally absorb all the warmth and love of their fans. But that evening, no one suspected what would happen in 2 months. According to Talinda, there were no signs of a disaster that happened just days later. Neither she, nor the children, nor Chester's friends or colleagues noticed anything strange. On the contrary, it seemed to everyone that he managed to survive the last events and gradually recovered from the shock. Chester didn't seem broken or depressed. He wanted to work on music and sent a few messages to Robert DeLeo, with whom he played in Stone Temple Pilots. He also planned, or pretended to plan, future performances and sent several emails to musician friends with the offer to perform together soon. Unfortunately, none of this was destined to come true.
I don't suffer from depression. I never have. And watching my husband go through it, I had no idea. I could not relate. And over the years, I educated myself to the best of my ability. However, I did not understand the severity of his thoughts. He shared them with me. We got him help, and everything happened at a time I can't stress enough, and we thought everything was okay. It was just took us by surprise.
It was Thursday, July 20th, 2017. Chester had just returned to his home in South Los Angeles to prepare for a planned photo shoot with the band. At 9 a.m., the driver was ready to pick him up, but no one left the house. Chester's housekeeper knocked on the door, got no answer, and went into the room. The driver heard her screams, rushed into the house, and later called 911. Chester Bennington did not leave a farewell note, and no alcohol or other substances were found in his blood. He was 41 years old, and he passed away on the birthday of his friend Chris Cornell, who also passed away 2 months ago. Throughout his life, Chester has experienced a huge amount of horror and suffering. It was visible in his songs and heard in his voice. Those demons that he had fought and sometimes defeated prevailed that day. According to his wife Talinda, he had remained sober for the past 6 months and even stopped taking antidepressants because of side effects. The next day, she posted a photo of Chester and their kids together from their latest vacation, where he looked very happy. The news reached the other band members, then the press and fans very quickly. Everyone hoped to the last that it was a fake and someone's bad joke. But Mike Shinoda shattered all hopes and confirmed the truth of the news in his Twitter. Chester Bennington was buried on July 29th near his home at the South Coast Botanic Garden. The closed funeral was attended by several hundred people, family members and friends of the musician. As part of the ceremony, a full set of musical instruments was installed on the stage to perform songs in his memory. Linkin Park is currently in a frozen state. In April 2022, Mike Shinoda said that he and the other members of the band are in contact, but there are currently no plans for album and tours. Mike spent the next 8 months after Chester's death in the studio. The result was his mini-album with the eloquent title, Post-Traumatic. According to Mike, this album was written for people who were going through the same hard time of losing Chester.
And I want you guys to know that you're 100% allowed to have any feelings you have. And my feelings are about celebration. Because Chester Bennington was one of the best singers of all time. And we were all just fortunate to know him. That's the bottom line. We were just lucky to have him in our lives. We were lucky to have the amazing songs that he sang. And I'm grateful to him for being, being like that vessel to make these songs come to life.
Despite the darkness Chester Bennington struggled with throughout his life, he remained an incredibly bright person. His music is a medicine that helps you when you feel desolated. His voice is soothing, even when it screams through your headphones. Unfortunately, he did not manage to get out of the maze of his own tragedies, but he definitely made millions of people happier. It's difficult to overestimate his contribution to music and influence on musicians of younger generations. Chester loved his fans, never felt like a star, and treated his work like any other. He felt responsible for taking up other people's time, so he tried to be grateful and put his soul into his singing. To be remembered, and he will be remembered, as one of the greatest vocalists and writers in the history of music. And if strangers who knew Chester only through his songs experienced this loss so hard, it's difficult to imagine what happened to his relatives and friends. His wife, Talinda, has dedicated her life to the study and dissemination of information about psychological health. In memory of Chester, she founded a program of psychological help called 320 Changes Directions. Its goal is to inform people about psychological help and help fight mental health problems. Chester and Talinda were married for 11 years, and during that time they had 3 children, Tyler, Leela, and Lily. Tyler is now 17 years old, runs a relatively popular TikTok channel, and reacts very strongly to any speculation regarding the death of his father. The voices of Chester's daughters, Leela and Lily, can be heard on the reissue of the album Grey Days, which was released after Bennington's death.
I tell a lot of people that they have to earn riches. I would have sailed away if I know that nothing would change.
Moreover, Bennington has 2 more sons from Samantha Ollett, who Chester lived with for 9 years, Jamie and Draven, and also has a son, Isaiah, who was born before his first marriage and whom Chester raised with Samantha and then with Talinda. Music was probably the only way for Chester to convey his feelings. He went through so much grief, but in the end he was sure of that fundamental power which he gave to the world much more than he received. Love is the thing that makes us want to become better people. It's the thing that keeps us connected to others. It's the thing that gives us compassion. It's the thing that gives us the drive to do really great things with our lives. And it's the thing you can always depend and count on when you can't count on anything else. Despite the fact that it was a rather tragic story, we hope that it was able to inspire you. If you liked it, we would be grateful for your like. Also, if you're interested, you can watch other videos about other outstanding personalities. Click on the video that appeared on your screen to do this. You were watching the Encode Stories channel. Thanks for being with us, and see you soon.